Ash is a new sci-fi horror thriller directed by the Flying Lotus. If you don't know who the Flying Lotus is, he's a producer, a DJ, a filmmaker, a rapper. He's been around for a little bit. He's produced a lot of scores on a lot of other TV shows and movies. I'm not sure, but I think this might be his feature film debut. Either way, it's directed by him, and it stars Eiza González and Aaron Paul, Iko Uwais from the Raid movies. So the story here follows a woman named Rhea, played by Eiza González. She wakes up on this spaceship on this mysterious planet. She wakes up to find out that all of her crewmates have been mysteriously slaughtered. Then later on, when a mysterious man named Brian, played by Aaron Paul, comes to the ship to meet with her, what follows is a series of psychological events that invoke a lot of terror and a lot of suspicion and a lot of paranoia, and thus you have a movie that takes place on a spaceship, and it's gonna remind you a lot of Alien. I will say this, I don't know what else Flying Lotus has going on in his future as far as filmmaking goes, but the man knows how to make a beautiful looking movie. This film is flat out gorgeous. No matter what you think about the movie, by the time it's all said and done, you have to say, so far, it's one of the best looking films of the year. This is absolute god tier production and art design. A lot of the look, the feel, and the design of everything that you see in this movie, a lot of it's gonna remind you of other classic shit that you see in sci-fi. Like, a lot of the ships and technology will remind you of Aliens. Maybe some of it will remind you of Blade Runner a little bit. A lot of things in this movie are going to remind you of games. Like, you're gonna get a lot of Mass Effect and Dead Space comparisons after you see this one. Maybe you might see some people compare this movie to Doom. Either way, that sci-fi horror element, as far as scary shit happening in space, technology built around all of that, yeah, it's gonna remind you a lot of those. Gotta give the movie a shout out for the cinematography. It's very dark, but also somehow very vibrant all at the same time. There's a lot of reds and blues and purples being used in cohesion here to create something that feels eerie and mysterious and haunted. It's gonna start to feel very claustrophobic at times. If the whole goal here is to make the entire vibe feel as haunted and as suspenseful as possible, I feel like the camera work, the cinematography, all of that, the design, Flying Lotus was absolutely in his bag when it comes to all of that technical shit. It also has to be said, and probably should have been expected considering the director's background, but the score for this movie is an absolute banger. It's a very pulse-pounding kind of sci-fi score. The only way I could really describe it, it feels like synthetic space horror hip-hop, and I don't really have a better way to put it than that. And I will say the leads are overall pretty solid, especially Eiza González and Aaron Paul. Before we go any further talking about Eiza González, I mean, it just needs to be said, unfortunately.
Can't wait to have your feet facing my ceiling with my tongue deep in your ass while I kiss all on your kitty.
Obligatory thirst out of the way, Eiza González is actually pretty good in this movie. She does pull off the vulnerability that you would expect of a character in her position. Her character in this movie has complete memory loss and has no idea who she is or what happened, and so the entire movie is about her piecing things together. She may not pull off the badassery that you would expect in a role like this, but the vulnerability is absolutely there. And Aaron Paul, for what it's worth, is not given a shit ton to work with, but he does do a pretty good job. Like I said, it's pretty workmanlike. Credit where it's due, the third act of this movie absolutely picks up, and there's some batshit things that start happening, and while it's not all handled as well as it could have been, I feel like you're gonna be entertained for that. So what you have here is a movie that's gonna remind you of Dead Space and Doom and sci-fi horror everywhere. The start of the movie is gonna introduce a mystery, and then the third act of the movie is gonna reveal the mystery, and then it's gonna be some action stuff before you get to the end. And then there's the middle 2/3 of this movie. The middle 2/3 of this movie is the biggest reason why I can't highly recommend it. Honestly, I feel like the middle 2/3 of this movie drags the rest of it down. We're introduced to the initial concept of someone with amnesia, and obviously the rest of the movie is about us as the audience and her trying to figure this shit out. But the middle part of the movie, which is 70% of the movie realistically, is mostly just a lot of plotting, a lot of meandering, a lot of repetitive scenes that don't really go anywhere. If you were to call the middle parts of this movie boring, I would have to agree. There's not enough character, there's not enough suspense, there's not enough action to really keep you invested in what's going on. Honest to God, it's just a lot of scenes of Rhea having dreams or having visions and wondering what happened, and then Aaron Paul is kind of fussing at her because he's like, hey, we need to get out of here. Beyond that, there are some flashbacks in this movie that do kind of piece together what happened to the crew before we get to the main mystery. I gotta tell you, the flashbacks that you see, the crew that she's with, and seeing their camaraderie and stuff like that, honestly, that feels like the more interesting movie. I feel like they had the potential to make this movie like the first two Aliens movies, but also they could have combined it with something that felt like The Thing. It honestly feels like they squandered all of that potential, and it just made it all pointless in the end. I'm gonna put it to you like this. Have you seen X-Men Origins recently? Dumb question, I'm pretty sure you haven't. Okay, so in X-Men Origins, there's like a 10-minute montage thing that happens at the beginning where you see Logan and you see Sabretooth and you see them going through wars and a whole bunch of crazy shit together as brothers. You see that 10-minute montage and you're like, holy shit, that seems pretty cool. And then you see the rest of the movie and you're like, holy shit, this is kind of ass. And when the movie's over, you can't help but think back to that 10-minute montage and you're like, what if the entire movie was about that? I feel like the entire movie by default would have been better. Likewise in Ash, I feel like the flashbacks with the crew was the better movie, the more interesting film, and I feel like you don't get enough of that, and then the movie that you do get is kind of underwhelming by the end. But hey, at least it's underwhelming while also being gorgeous, and by gorgeous I mean Eiza González, and it's shot pretty well too, so that counts. Ash was another solid but unspectacular sci-fi horror. I'm gonna leave this one in the Daily Planet. Visually and sonically, I would say it's worth checking out if you're a big sci-fi fan. So those are my thoughts on Ash. Tell me, what are your 5 favorite sci-fi films of all time? Go ahead and put that in the comment section below. Please like and subscribe to the Superfan Show, and if you like what you see, tell me how you feel, and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace.